This is a story about two collections. One is the collection from the Katagami Project. It has one target: hand-carved, antique Japanese textile stencils. The other is the lifelong gatherings of Marcia Donahue. This is her home. Because you could ask why I'm showing you a collection that has no Katagami in it to talk about Katagami. I've actually been thinking about that a lot because it took me a while to tease out, why am I doing this? And the answer was that when I came through here, Marcia's collection is just so much more physical than how people come to know collections.
Right.
And so I'm surrounded by obi, they're like all over the walls, that these collections create this physical environment. When I first came through here, I was like, wow. Well, first it's just wow, but then the second part is, oh, these are really closely related to Katagami.
What happened was a friend brought me a piece of fabric from her trip to Asia. She bought it in Bhutan, but it was a piece of brocade woven in Varanasi, India, where they also weave brocade for Japanese obis. It's a trade. Mm-hmm. She gave me this gaudy piece of brocade, big and wide. It hadn't been tailored into an obi. And I looked at it and I said, I don't even like that. And then gradually I thought, I really love that. And then I thought, I need more. This is how it goes. So I looked in flea markets and found some. I found some from a dealer in Japanese antiques. But then, shortly after, and this is what really got me in huge obi trouble, I found a dealer of used clothing and textiles in Osaka, Japan. They were selling these things for pennies on the thousands of yen because there was a glut. A lot of people had these things in storage. They wanted to get rid of them and were selling them to these people who were amassing them and just releasing them to the world. Some very expensive still, but some that I thought were visually stunning were cheap. I could actually afford them. I came to Katagami because the collection I hold, it was my father's collection. And I knew Katagami, the way they smelled and the texture of their surfaces, before I had words. They were all laid out on this giant table in my basement, and he would sort through them to select what would go into an exhibition. And I would be standing there under the visual line of the table, just sort of seeing the details and the edges of things. So it took me years to figure out that Katagami had patterns on them or pictures in them. And when I did, they still came off as super sculptural. The paper of a used Katagami, for example, has this riffle in it like nori, and it gets thin and black, and the patterns are held in place by these threads. So a leaf is held on a tree with the threads, and the tree is held in the landscape with a thread. And even when the thread breaks, sometimes when you go inside the Katagami, you see someone's like taken a needle and stitched it back into its place so that the pattern can be used again. And as I walked through and saw these obi, I had to, I recognized the Katagami in them, and it took me a while to figure out why I'm talking about these things together. But the main reason is because I like objects, and I learn through experiences more than I do information. And these obi are just rich with Katagami information. So when I walk through Marcia's obi rooms,
I see the patterns that I know from Katagami. And so if I go through my collection, I have maybe with a really common pattern like cherry, there's a cherry here somewhere. I can take, there it is, a cherry pattern all the way back maybe to the 1700s. And then I have enough of them that I can track them forward, maybe as far forward a couple of hundred years, maybe to the 1900s. And then when I saw these, which are brighter and bolder and bigger than Katagami, these take those same patterns forward another 100 years.
I often wear Japanese textiles because I love them. And when I was in graduate school in the 70s, that's when samurai movies were a big deal, and there were Japanese things available, and I was in a textile community here in Berkeley, people who cared about textiles and Japanese textiles. People were going to Japan, going to the flea markets there and getting wads of what I liked the best to wear and still do, which was Japanese farmers' clothing. It's called noragi, noragi. And it's durable and doesn't show dirt. It's loose, cool, and comfortable. And I should be wearing some right now, but I'm not. But I usually do. I love those textiles. I love wearing them. I love the way they look. And I've been sewing with them too. When I went to Japan and went to some flea markets myself, I gathered yardage and old kimono that I could take apart, cotton ones that were wearable. And I've sewn pants and things that I wear all the time out of those Japanese textiles.
Some of her garments are made using Katagami. They were patterned with Katagami and dyed. Others are not Katagami made, but they are using traditional textile techniques that Katagami were made to mimic. So Katagami were made to print textiles that were just really hard to make, like tie-dye or shibori. And those patterns are visible on Marcia's clothes and also in the Katagami. So this Katagami I found, it mimics a piece of denim as if it were sewn onto patch a worn thin part. And the way they do that is that they have this stitch, and it's a little cross stitch. It's off center, and it goes all the way across the patch. So it simultaneously really attaches the patch nicely, but it also reinforces the worn fabric. What was interesting to me about this is that, okay, so these workers' garments, they are not elevated. They're important enough and deliberate enough that you want to make a Katagami to look like one. And that's a really interesting idea to me. And I didn't know that until I saw Marcia's clothes. And these, more than anything else, taught me about Katagami. So when I see Marcia's jacket, her jacket has the shell, which is one pattern, a lining, another pattern. She has collar, she has cuffs, she has belt, she has pockets. All of them have different patterns. When you look at Katagami, they all live in these like pristine little borders, and it's one pattern. I never imagined you could put so much together, that there could be such a symphony of designs working compatibly. So Marcia has a garden, and it's got a footprint that's essentially Japanese design. And then you go into a garden and you go, well, wait, why do we share all, like I go through the garden and then I look at Katagami and I go, oh, why do we share all these same imagery and iconography? And the answer is because we share a climate, and because California learned so much from Japanese gardening aesthetic. So there are plants that are important in Katagami, and they're important in California too, starting with iris, and mostly here they're Japanese iris, which is a specific butterfly iris. There's pine, there's bamboo, there's persimmon. What was so informative to me, I just love Marcia's living, breathing, wind whipping through the leaves garden. but it helped me understand aspects of my own collection, because there are a lot of things that people say, oh, that's tree bark, or oh, that's this plant. But the people who designed the Katagami didn't just choose sort of the iconic image, the way, for example, you say California live oak, like it's just that one profile. We all know it. But because the Katagami and fabrics and a lot of Japanese aesthetic are broken up across seasons, you will find both the plant in full flourish, but also the plant with all where the pattern is just the leaves on the ground. And it's not obvious, right? Like you see something and somebody says, oh, that's bark. It's like, that's bark. It doesn't look like bark to me. And then you walk through the garden and it's like, oh, it's bark. I see it. It all makes sense to me.
What I wanted to say about collecting the stuff that I collect, is how much it's not about showing somebody else's story. As a matter of fact, it's about me.
Right.
I'm interested in my own taste, and I'm interested in my reactions to things, and I'm interested in my interests.
Yeah.
And what's unusual about these is that not a lot survived, obviously, because that's a lot of white space, and every time you print on, and the overall background is origami. So these are origami cranes, and these are paper-like, and so it reverses. Bunch of tumult in there, reversing ground, dark grounds. And these are persimmons, and that always entertains me because they're the mulberry paper to a tanning process so that it will be sturdy and flexible, and I don't know what. They're all, each one of these is ordered and has a number. We use video to shoot video, and it does that shimmer thing.
Oh, right, yeah,
right?
yeah, I remember.
So that's it, but this is just, that's a whopper. And
It is kind of showing up on the
cool.
that.
The pure nuttiness of this particular pattern, right? Like, what is that? I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah.
But they're very psychedelic as far as I'm concerned, even though the year is probably 1890.
Yeah.
Or not. But that's dizzying.
Yeah.
In the sense of that I think is interesting. Okay, this one is probably from the 1700s because of this. Like I can see from this that it's, and earlier they were super poor, and so there's a lot of being super resourceful. And so this is an old document that was reused.
Tell me that.
Tremendous sensitivity to bush clover. These are supposed to be streams. And the patterns repeat this way. So there would be a long bench, and you'd lay out your patterns. Anything interesting yet?
Yeah. I mean, these are some
Yeah.
good close.
But you can actually get that shimmer, right? Can you see mine now?
Yeah, yeah.
So these are in the game, and they all get turned over, and you have to figure out, like, you have to match the little fishing village to the other little. I think this is Suzuki grass, maybe. Ask your grandmother. Goofy. I like him. but when the patterns get big, so big, small is one of the dynamics. And then the other pattern that comes up is this idea of something that's kind of regular. Interesting moment, this idea of, I don't have redwoods on all my clothes, but all of these others, that's hard to see. This is, this is mist, right? This squiggle. And then these are bouquets for Boys' Day. All the art comes in boxes, and you can put it away in its box. So when a new season comes, you switch. This is quite, so these, right? So these are qualities of women, right? Blooms in winter, bends but doesn't. That it has enough complexity so that even if you're seeing it 3 times down the front of a garment, you're never going to be able to put it together, right?
Right.
Like this goes on that. This is some of these, like these value a certain kind of precision. Like this is a show-off's pattern. Like the restful blank of those leaves, dogwood. And some of these, like I don't know what to make of. That's super Art Nouveau, and it's got the wabi-sabi kind of nibbled on leaf thing. But I think that's an extraordinary pattern.
Yeah.
And the idea that you can repeat and how it's beginning to have that kind of feature here, the wrinkly. That's all I got.